All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the That's Not Real Trek podcast. My name is Scotty, also known as EBC. Directly below me, my beautiful co-host, Short and Sweet. She is both short and sweet, and fools a
Times
lot
two.
of people with that personality. Yeah. Um, so this is episode number 7 now, and we're getting into the thick of it. Like in Discovery now, we're in the mirror universe, and they're doing their best to get home. And the big thing that Burnham has to deal with now is that her former captain, Philippa Georgiou, is actually the empress in the mirror universe, and not only having to deal with the feelings of dealing with this person that so much reminds her of her former beloved captain that she mutinied against, but also having to now deal with Tyler's mutiny against her, or rather, just his whatever, trying to attempt to assassinate her and be an all-around bad guy. Um, and now we also have, at the end of the last episode, Lorca, who has escaped the torture device, the agonizer, and is now running loose. And we also find out that Lorca is of the mirror universe. He is not from our universe. So that leads us to understand several really stupid things about his personality over the entire series. Well, since episode 3 that we've seen him, all these things that were questionable or his behavior just seemed odd or off, and that is entirely because he is of the mirror universe. And we find out that all along he was trying to get back to the mirror universe and devise this very complex and detailed plan in order to get back. And now that he is back, for God's sake, the only reason he's here is because he wants the fucking Emperor's seat. Like, really, dude? You know, as our friend Slate would say, this whole time?
The whole time. Yeah, he's driven. You got to give him that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and probably that's indicative of like most of the everything that's done in the mirror universe is how do you advance yourself, how do you gain more power and control, how, who's the next person you got to murder to move up the ladder and all this. And that is a theme that has been often talked about and visited in the plots involving the mirror universe ever since the first original Star Trek episode, all the way up until um, when we last visited the mirror universe in Enterprise, and and they talked about how this compels the people that are there. Imagine living in a society where you're taught from birth that if you want to succeed in life, you have to kill people and climb the ladder. You know, um, and if I want to say this, that if you dive deeper into the lore in the books, in the comic books, and in some of the other things that are related to what has already been explored in video on the Mirror Universe, you find that there is so much detailed information on how exactly things progressed in the mirror universe. Like, I remember reading some of the novels that were describing the DS9 era mirror universe stuff. Now, they crossed into the mirror universe 3 or 4 times in DS9. And some of the books that I have and have read about that whole thing, including what I had mentioned previously, the Shatner verse, the books written by William Shatner that continue the Life and Adventures of Captain Kirk after he's died the second time or whatever. Um, they really dive deep into this chronological order of, well, in original episode where we went into the mirror universe, it was Spock with the goatee who was being convinced by Kirk from our universe that if he wanted to enact a change in how the empire was run, that this is how he had to do certain things, and then in the books they start exploring, okay, what happened after that, and saying this is how the mirror universe continues to be the thing it is all the way through to Picard's time and beyond. So it really is fascinating to me how some of the people that have been licensed over the years to write books and comic books under the Star Trek flag have been allowed to fill in all of the gaps and provide details on this and that, and it all pretty much fits with the canon of what Paramount and CBS have created. All right.
As long as Disney doesn't buy him and then say like none of that happened.
Fuck if that ever happens, man.
Right.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put it. I mean, we're past the days of Les Moonves captaining the ship that is CBS, and he was part of the holdout. Like after he was gone, that's when they started greenlighting all of these things that are related to Star Trek. But I could see CBS doing that at some
Yeah, me
point
too.
if they don't believe it's profitable enough to continue. They might
Hmm.
just say, here, Disney, go destroy this.
Right.
So at least it will have had a good run. I mean, from 1966 until 2022, and we definitely have at least a couple more years of new stuff coming out here
Yeah. I
before
think
maybe
it's
they set it
relatively
down.
popular, so as long as it's making them money, they're gonna keep on churning stuff out.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the like each of these streaming services has like their own flagship type deals, things that are the big original streaming content that they put out there. Uh, Star Trek is definitely Paramount Plus, and there's a few other things there like the new Twilight Zone and a couple other things. But Star Trek is definitely a thorough part of that, and I think they've got so much invested in it now that we can expect to see at least a few more years worth of content before maybe they back off from it. So, all right, here we go with this week's first episode. What's Past is prologue. See you back in just a minute. Yes, the war is over. Oh
Yay!
shit. All right. So that actually, in my opinion, was kind of like a simplistic episode. All we really had was the fight between Lorca and Giorgio, which was a little bit surprising to me, kind of the way it played out. The fact that Lorca was so easily able to infiltrate and take over. So either he's a mastermind when it comes to war and battle and was able to outsmart the chancellor or emperor, but more along the lines of it seemed like maybe he was just utilizing the uh, the concepts of how the mirror universe works and how people act in that. Let's overthrow the emperor because it's time for new leadership, and everybody's like, hurrah, all right, new leader, there we go.
Yeah.
um And then, as so often, oh, what'd you do? Is that the cat?
The cat is
Damn cat.
just being a shithead.
That's all right. Um, and then, as so often happens in Star Trek history, the crew finds some really convoluted way to save the day and accomplish what they need to accomplish. And yeah, the one thing that I found really interesting was Burnham. Unless this is just the writers trying to maximize the potential of the story, Burnham found the. This is like the second time she's found the most risky way to do something. And that is to offer herself as the method by which Discovery and everybody else gets home. Okay, so we've seen self-sacrificial things before. She did this in the Harry Mudd episode, where
Yeah.
she just swallows the dark matter thing. It's like, oh, bye. um, it seems like Burnham's character is very adept at finding the most riskiest, the most painful way to do something and then accomplishing it. I don't know. What do you think on
she's
that?
she's reckless. I
Yeah,
just
I
think that
mean,
she's a reckless character.
yeah, I mean
She
that may
doesn't think
be,
about.
yeah, or if she's not necessarily putting enough time and thought into a course of action, she's maybe just like not considering all the alternatives or sees no other way, therefore we must do this. I mean, that was the whole thing with the starting the war in the first place.
Yeah.
Just no, sorry, we have to shoot first. We have to. We have to.
Half. Are
You
we
know,
sure she's not from the Terran universe?
I don't know, but yeah, I found that kind of interesting. Like, that's the only, and believe it or not, that we're gonna see quite a bit more of that from her over the time. Oh, the cat's fine. It's just sitting up there silently,
Yeah, just chewing on a shelf.
silently plotting your death.
It's literally 19 minutes after normal dinner time for them, and this is
Ah,
yeah. So he's
I'm gonna
he's waiting.
I'm gonna sit here until you feed me, mother.
Yeah, I'm gonna knock things down and
Um, so yeah, all of that, and then culminating in actually getting back to the regular universe, and we are there, but we are 9 months late, and now all of a sudden we've got the brand new problem of the Klingons essentially winning the war, because Discovery has been gone for 9 months.
yeah.
Um, so what are your thoughts on how they're going to proceed and deal with all this?
Well, they're gonna. I mean, my guess is they're gonna have to figure out a way to go back in time. So they're gonna like look for some kind of I don't know wormhole or slingshot around the sun or some craziness. They're gonna have to find a way to explain how they're gonna go back and retcon it all.
Burnham's like, we have to go back in time. We have to go back in time.
We have to go
There's no other
back.
way. Um, so now, where did you last see this? So did you go all the way to the
I
end of season one?
I don't know because I think that I remember seeing this episode, and I don't know if I saw any further than this.
Hmm.
I'll have to let you know once we watch the next one, but
Yeah,
I don't know if we actually finished all of season one even.
and that's fine. Especially because um, that was part of the whole purpose of all this, is so that
Mhm.
we both catch up on all of the new stuff that we want to see. Kind of forcing ourselves to do this in a series and in a a method here to actually watch everything over time. Um, and I'm also interested in talking to you about the stuff that I've seen, but you haven't. It's going to
Yeah.
be obviously there very soon here where we get to the stuff that I haven't seen, and I'm purposefully not watching it beforehand so
Mhm.
that it's new for both of us. But that'll be pretty cool. Spoiler alert: they do not go back in time. They're going to
Oh,
deal with the Federation and what remains of it as is, and
okay.
deal with that. So on that note, the interesting thing about the way the show was designed and the way they promoted Discovery as exploring this event in Star Trek history that's been much described but never actually visited is the way the Klingon War started and the way it ended. And we do know going into the original series that by the time that happens, which is not much more time in the Star Trek timeline, that we have essentially settled down into a Cold War where relations between the humans and the Klingons are just essentially strained again. But there's not outright violence or anything like that. They just get together on a planet and start beating the hell out of each other because they insult each other's ships, you know. um, but it's not been like any kind of big violence between the humans and the Klingons until we get to Star Trek Six, where Chancellor Gorkin is assassinated. Um, So we do know that happens, and essentially all we're going to be watching now with the Klingon War is how the rest of this shakes out. Now that we uh, have this setting of the Klingons essentially essentially gaining all this territory. Not necessarily won the war per se, but you could see on the war map that they showed how far into previously Federation territory the Klingons had advanced and taken over and occupied. Um,
Well, they kind of made it seem like the war is done. Just,
yeah,
with that bit there at the end where they're like, "Oh, Starfleet's not even responding.
right.
Like we don't have an automated answer or anything." It kind of like is very foreboding. So, we'll see next episode
Right.
how that's gonna continue on, but they kind of left it on like it's almost a cliffhanger.
Hmm.
It's like is that supposed to be the
Well,
end of the season? And they decided they wanted two more episodes, so
well, it's interesting you say that because my very next point was going to be, if you remember, we had out of 15 episodes, you had the first two episodes that dealt with Burnham and her mutiny and the start of the war. Then we jumped with episode 3 to now Lorca and Discovery and everything that is entailed with that now we know was just Lorca's plan to get back to the mirror universe, but how they dealt with those things under that scenario. And now for the last two episodes we're back in the regular universe, but facing an entirely different scenario than we did in the first two episodes. So there really is three parts to the season, and they all have different feels and they all deal with different things. Um, and I think they did that on purpose because the main storyline, which was who is Lorca, how do we deal with this, and how do we deal with Burnham with her mutineer status interacting with the crew. So all of that was established and now resolved with Lorca's death. So I think that's what they aimed for with the last two episodes was just to tie up loose ends and also give us a concept of what they started with the beginning of the Klingon War, how that is starting to wrap up. And to be honest, it really doesn't. It goes into season two. They're not
Okay.
necessarily at war, but I feel like we almost had two overarching storylines there. The one in the middle, which was Lorca and his deal, and now the Klingon War and how that wraps up basically.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, Speaking of cliffhangers, it seems like we have one almost every single episode.
Yeah.
um, and especially the format in which they presented that. Oh, great! We just saved the not only the universe but all of the universes by taking
Hmm.
this very heroic and dangerous and courageous action that just barely worked by the skin of our teeth. Oh, and we lost the war. You know.
Yeah. And we retconned why there's no spore drive in the
Yeah.
later
Oh,
series.
actually, no, it comes back.
Oh,
I
okay.
will tell you this, yeah. It does come back, and they do use it a few more times.
Oh,
And
interesting.
the reason why the spore drive is no longer in existence when we come to the original series will be answered as well in the next season.
Yeah, I figured they wrapped it up right there and that was going to be the end of it.
Not quite. We
Hmm.
still have to use it a few more times just for plot points, but
Yeah, yeah.
okay. All right. So then our second episode this week is number 14, The War Without and the War Within. So here we go. Okay. Hold on. I
Book
gotta.
from Saru.
Yeah. Oh my god. What the fuck is Cornwell doing?
Oh, dumb.
Well, and we also from Sarek's last message there get the concept that the entire Federation Council is behind this move.
Mm, yeah.
So
So this is what they see as the best fit for her.
I gotta wonder who came up with that in the first place. Like was it somebody on the Federation Council who is just like, what if we take this evil person over here and put her in a position of power here? You know?
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. So the war is going badly, and apparently that is like Cornwell's um, justification for putting Emperor Zhou in power as captaincy, lying to the rest of the crew about who she is and where she came from and what happened and all that good stuff. Can you think of any reason why the Federation Council would do something like that? Because I'm kind of at a loss.
I mean, it's got to be out of desperation. It has to be like they have no other course of action.
But what are the plus sides? What are the
I mean,
benefits that could be had? Do you think?
she's very tactical and, being from that mirror universe, she is accustomed to like wartime action.
That's
So
true. Yeah,
they're probably just trying to, that's her strength. They're trying to, I don't know, play to her strengths, I guess.
but I mean, it's almost like they're trying to look past her trustworthiness. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, this
Especially with only three people knowing. It was just three, right? Saru, Michael, and that guy that was in the transporter. Those are the only people on board that know who she actually is.
right, and in addition to the Federation Council and
Hmm.
whoever remains there, Yes, out of desperation, but it's just like, really, this is the best thing you guys can come up with. We can't just use her as an advisor. Ask her for some
Yeah,
bits and pieces.
right. Unless she played hardball and was like, I'm not telling you anything unless you give me, this
Right.
this role.
That's a humdinger for me.
Yeah.
um. So yeah, that's where we're left now, with apparently attempting to bring the Klingon War to an end for, if no other reason than that the Federation is pretty much at their wits' end, trying to defend themselves from essentially 24 different wars going on all at the same time, because there is no coordination or loyalty between any of the Klingon houses. We saw that L'Rell did not take that information well either. Like, to hear that after 9 months of just being gone, the Klingons are not united at all. And that definitely does come into play in the next season, because L'Rell is one of the holdovers, and that really deals with her character and how her story continues. Um, but we're also seeing like different character developments in Burnham and Tyler and Cornwell. I mean, we saw how she just kind of froze after finding
Yeah.
out that Starbase One was gone.
Mhm.
Um, and now, after losing Lorca, as she said her Lorca, I thought that was rather interesting that she used the word her Lorca
Mhm.
instead of our Lorca. Um, Almost like an admission to everyone else there that they had this relationship.
Right.
Um, it's almost like now. Cage mentioned that she was a doctor. I missed that as well. I
Yeah,
didn't
I
know
don't
that.
know where that
I don't
came
know. Maybe
from, and then he
Cage pulled
kind
it
of
out of his
didn't
ass or something, but
probably.
but I mean, yeah, she definitely isn't handling this entire scenario well. Where it seems like the war is getting worse and worse, and um, oh, therapist. Okay.
Hmm. So it's like Deanna Troy became an admiral.
Yeah, I do recall her saying something about like working with Lorca or something like that. But
Okay.
either way, we're gonna find out in the next season more about the makeup of Starfleet, the heads of Starfleet. Oh, I see. And the Federation Council, what remains of that after the Klingon War, and then how we proceed from that point with what is left. So this is one thing that was not mentioned in the original series, is just how much the Klingon War decimated the Federation prior to the original series beginning. And I think part of that is because the original series was focused much more on exploration, that whole concept of finding new worlds and new civilizations. And yeah, there was things to deal with, like the Klingons and skirmishes and stuff like that, but they never really focused so much on the details of that and what really happened to it. So this is establishing in canon history just how much the Federation was decimated by the Klingons before the war ended. And now we get to find out exactly how that power shift occurred in the final episode. And we know it happens, but again, the details are kind of hidden from us in various ways. So, what all did you get from this last episode, episode 14?
I thought it was interesting that there are so many strong women in powerful roles in this show. And I kind of wonder, it was making me think about it. It's like, oh yeah, people like, they tear the show apart. And I'm like, how much of that is because there are women in these roles that traditionally are like male leaders? And if that's affecting at all like how people are seeing the show, because really, especially this episode, the men took a back seat. Like this was all Laurel and Cornwall and Michael and Giorgio. Like this is focused on them.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of like, I don't know, curious about that.
Uh, Here's the thing, and I've not extensively looked at it, but I read articles, read forums and posts and things like that on occasion, and one of the big things that I think a lot of people that claim that this or anything else that came before it is not real Trek is because of encountering things that are being presented in the show that they don't like. Okay, so that's obvious, but what may not be so obvious is the motives behind it. So, like when the Next Generation came out, everybody that was a TOS fan was so skeptical about it being able to live up to Gene Roddenberry's vision, even though he was one of the executive producers at the time. And the same thing, I mean, DS9 and Voyager were kind of along the same lines, but it was much more muted, and people, especially because, like, those began and were running at the same time that TNG 6 and season 6 and 7 were running. So that was kind of like, okay, all right, we'll accept this, and it's all part of canon history. Then when Enterprise came along, it was all like, what? What are you talking about prequel and this and that? What do you mean there was a ship called Enterprise before the Enterprise? Uh, and every excuse in the book. And then when it came to this stuff, mostly from what I was hearing, it was people that were, before even seeing it, deciding that CBS and Paramount weren't going to be able to do it justice with whatever new series they came up with. And then when it did come out, they said, oh, well, it's so full of liberal propaganda that we're just going to write it off, such as the homosexual relationship between Stamets and Culber. Yeah, I mean, there was nobody that really gave a shit about Janeway being the first woman captain in the series, but the fact that maybe women have so much power in this new series and what they're doing with it or anything like that, um, there are overarching themes here that take into account how people feel currently politically, just like Roddenberry did back in the 60s and the creators of TNG and DS9 and Voyager did back in the 90s and early 2000s. That's always been a big part of it. But we definitely see. I know. Shut up, Cage. Jesus. We definitely see that a lot of these people, like, I mean, let's for instance say with the homosexual relationship, you're going to get a bunch of original Star Trek fans that are not necessarily homophobic, but they just think that kind of a relationship isn't right. Why? Because they're old. And that's the way they were raised, or they just don't want to change or do whatever. So they're automatically going to, and I know that for a fact because my dad was one of them. My dad was a big fan of TOS and even TNG, and when I told him about that, he's like, "Yeah, that's not for me."
Yeah.
because he's a Christian and he believes that's not right and shouldn't be portrayed or celebrated on TV or whatever he, came up with in his mind.
Hmm.
I think in general that's a big part of how people justify this thing in their head, that it's not real Trek because it doesn't fit whatever mantra, but more specifically because of the politics that are discussed, and or even not discussed, just innuendo or insinuated or implied throughout the storyline, because it's modern times and we have modern writers that are going to put stuff
Right.
reflecting what happens right now into it. Um, yeah. So I don't know, but that's interesting that that's what you picked up on, was the female power. And how are they
Mhm.
doing with that so far in the show?
I mean, like I said in the comments, I think Laurel, Giorgio, and Cornwall to an extent. Now we did see a little bit of weakness from her here, um, and we did see a little bit of weakness from her regarding Lorca, but uh, they're all, Michael's just kind of, she is, but she isn't. Like,
Yeah.
it's like she's trying to be, but it doesn't come across as well. I don't know. Yeah, it could be just a difference in the actor's
Yeah.
abilities.
Yeah, that's what I was saying when we were talking back and forth on this. That, I mean, Burnham, as played by Sonequa Martin Green, is just like, the intensity is off the scale and it's always on. Like,
Hmm.
everything she does is intense unless it doesn't make sense. Like she's walking in the hall eating blueberries with Saru. Okay,
Oh man.
there, yeah. But even then, it's just like, you can almost see like the gears spinning in her head. How she's what is her next move, even if it's something as innocuous as that. Um, and she's so like driven passionately towards action that that's all she can think about is what is her next move. And it's not necessarily malicious, but it's almost like she can't see the forest for the trees sometimes with what she's trying to do, deciding what her next move should be.
Right.
Cornwell, she she seems to be suffering a lot from not being able to deal with what the universe is throwing at her. Like, you remember when that they had that episode with her in bed with Lorca, and her way of dealing with Lorca pulling a gun on her was just to essentially freak out and tell him he needs help.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. Aren't you? With if our friend in chat Legion Cage is correct, if she's a therapist, well, what the fuck are you doing about it?
Right.
Okay, are you going to get him that help? Are you going to,
She's supposed to be the help.
or at least, let's open up a channel with a teledoc, or
Yeah.
something, so that you can get the help you need and retain your captaincy? Or how does she handle the threat of the Klingons being on the doorstep of Earth? Not very well. Not very well. And granted, that was all written into the character, but um, what is she going to be able to do to prove herself worthy of continuing as the admiral who's making all the decisions on this? You know, um, at the very least, I can see what you're saying about, like, this is all very heavy on, especially with the absence of Lorca now, and Saru is kind of bound by his position to just go along with all of this. Burnham is definitely going to do that because she's not even a member of Starfleet at the moment. Um, and who the hell knows what Georgiou is doing? She's trying to take over and become the Emperor of the Federation of Planets
And for
now,
the
or
Federation,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, hers is probably more straightforward, but
Hmm.
that just proves all the more that this desperate move by the Federation Council is not going to end well, no matter what they
Probably
do.
not. No. Can't imagine.
Yeah. All right. So, any other thoughts between those two episodes?
No, I think it's a good build up towards because the next one's the season finale. So I think we got
Yeah.
a good build up. We've started kind of like a new storyline here, so it'll be interesting to see how they end the season.
Yeah. And
Because I
actually,
don't really much remember a lot of this. I remember scenes and bits here and there, but I don't remember like the whole overarching story.
yeah. And really, they are already in this episode before the last episode of the season, starting to set up with various things that are going on, the threads of the story that are all going into season two. So we're already seeing some of those things being set up, like potentially Giorgio being the captain of the Discovery now, even though she's not really uh, the person that everybody thinks she is, and Starfleet is lying to their crew about her. Um, and the spore drive. So, like you said, we have to at some point discontinue the use of the spore drive and keep it under wraps. It never existed. Part of that could have been relevant to the fact that Discovery was in the mirror universe, and Cornwell basically said, "Sorry, that never existed. There will be no mention or record of any of this." Mostly because if that information fell into the wrong hands, like the Klingons, it would make matters much worse. Um,
Yeah.
so potentially the spore drive could be wrapped up with that whole mess, but we're like I said, we're using it again now to bounce into the Klingon homeworld and you know do some weird shit, and hopefully everything works out right. But we don't know. If the Federation Council is that desperate, then it's much worse than maybe they're letting on, and even more than we know. I'm
Yeah.
reminded of yesterday's Enterprise in TNG, where they are thrown into the parallel universe where the war with the Klingon Empire is either never ended or was rekindled in TNG times, and Picard was telling somebody, maybe it was Guinan, that the war was going very badly for the Federation. Um, so that I find that interesting. Some of the parallels with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, then next week is episode 15, and then we will have four of the short trek episodes. Those are only like 10 to 15 minutes each. Um, so we might actually go a little bit longer than a normal week that we've had thus far with two regular episodes. But we'll fit some good content in there and explore some news stories aside from this one that we've been having so far with Discovery Season 1. Some of them are related and others are not. And some of them are going to be completely new and interesting, unrelated to everything that we've looked at thus far. But one thing is for sure, and I have definitely found this to be true in almost everything that CBS and Paramount have done thus far, there are Easter eggs for all of the rest of the other Star Treks strewn so much throughout what they have produced here. Like the Lorca putting on the Scottish accent,
Yeah.
pretending to be the engineer,
That's
as
so
an
good.
homage to Scotty. Yeah.
Right.
Um, so yeah, we're definitely going to see much more of that, and it should be fun. So,
Mhm.
all right. So next week is I'll just say real quickly, we have Discovery Season 1, Episode 15, Will You Take My Hand? Short treks, and on the short treks, we're going to be bouncing around. I think there's like, I want to say 9 total or so, maybe 7. Bouncing around according to their relevance to what we are seeing in the rest of the series. So we've got Season 2, Episode 5, The Girl Who Made the Stars, Season 1, Episode 4, The Escape Artist, that deals with Harry Mudd again, and that'll be the last time we see him. Season 2, Episode 2, The Trouble with Edward, who introduces a couple brand new characters that are absolutely hilarious. And Season 1, Runaway, that sets the stage for Discovery Season 2.
Awesome.
And that will be it. Okay. All right. We'll see y'all next week then. Adios.
Bye.